The cold, unforgiving rain lashed against the panoramic windows of the penthouse suite, each drop a tiny hammer blow against the glass, mirroring the relentless rhythm of Alana's own anxieties. She stood, a solitary figure silhouetted against the cityscape, the vibrant lights of downtown Chicago blurring into streaks of neon. Her shift at the Obsidian, one of the city's most exclusive, and notoriously discreet underground establishments, had just ended. The air still hummed with the ghosts of expensive cigars, clinking glasses, and hushed, powerful conversations. Alana, a vision of quiet elegance in her tailored black uniform, clutched her small leather bag, its contents a meager collection of bus fare and a worn copy of a Russian poetry anthology. Her mind, however, wasn't on Pushkin or Lermontov, but on the looming stack of bills back in her cramped apartment. A single, heavy sigh escaped her lips, a whisper swallowed by the vastness of the room. She was just a waitress, an invisible cog in a machine built for the city's elite, yet tonight, something felt different. A tremor of unease, like a distant rumble of thunder, had settled deep within her. She couldn't shake the feeling that her life, so carefully constructed on the fragile pillars of routine and anonymity, was about to be irrevocably altered. Before you skip, just remember, channels like this only survive if you hit subscribe. Otherwise, stories like this one just disappear. Her routine was a carefully choreographed dance of precision and invisibility. 6 days a week, Alana navigated the opulent halls of the Obsidian, serving drinks and smiles to men whose names echoed in boardrooms and whispered in back alleys. She moved with a quiet grace, her dark, tightly coiled hair and sharp, intelligent eyes often overlooked amidst the dazzling array of patrons. Tonight, however, had been unusual. A new face, a powerful presence, had dominated the private dining room. He was a man of stark contrasts, impeccably dressed in a charcoal suit that seemed to absorb the light, his dark eyes held a piercing intensity that could make even the most seasoned power players squirm. He moved with a coiled, predatory grace, and his voice, when he spoke, was a low rumble that commanded immediate attention. She'd overheard snatches of conversations, whispers of Bratva, territory, and negotiations. These were the words that usually sent a chill down her spine, a reminder of the dangerous undercurrents that flowed beneath Chicago's polished surface. But this man, he was different. His gaze had lingered on her for a fraction too long, a subtle shift in the air that only she seemed to notice. It wasn't a leer, not overtly sexual, but something far more unsettling, a calculating assessment, as if she were a puzzle he was trying to solve. As she stepped out of the back entrance, the rain had softened to a persistent drizzle, washing the city streets with a slick, reflective sheen. The air was cool and crisp, carrying the scent of damp earth and exhaust fumes. Her usual bus stop was a block away, past the dimly lit alleyways that branched off the main street. She pulled her thin cardigan tighter, a futile attempt to ward off the chill that had nothing to do with the weather. The uneasy feeling intensified, a prickle at the back of her neck. She quickened her pace, her sensible shoes making soft tapping sounds on the wet pavement. Suddenly, a shadow detached itself from the deeper darkness of an alley. A figure emerged, tall and imposing, blocking her path. Her heart leaped into her throat, a frantic bird trapped in a cage. It was him. The man from the private dining room. Alana, isn't it? His voice was a low, resonant baritone, carrying a distinct, almost imperceptible accent that she couldn't quite place. It wasn't a question, but a statement, a confirmation of knowledge that sent a shiver down her spine. He stepped closer, and the faint glow of a distant street lamp illuminated his features. He was even more formidable up close, his jawline sharp, his eyes a depthless obsidian. There was an undeniable magnetism about him, a dangerous allure that warred with the primal fear gripping her. How do you know my name?" Her voice was barely a whisper, a stark contrast to the thundering of her pulse. She instinctively took a step back, but he simply tilted his head, a faint, almost imperceptible smile playing on his lips. "I make it my business to know things, Alana." He paused, his gaze sweeping over her, a possessive intensity that made her skin prickle. And you, my dear, are of particular interest. I'm just a waitress, she managed, her voice gaining a surprising hint of steel despite her fear. I have nothing to do with whatever it is you do. He chuckled, a low, rumbling sound that seemed to vibrate through the very ground beneath her feet. Ah, but that's where you're mistaken. Sometimes, the most ordinary people find themselves caught in extraordinary circumstances. He took another step, closing the distance between them, and Alana felt a sudden, dizzying rush of adrenaline. His scent, a sophisticated blend of expensive cologne and something uniquely masculine, enveloped her. It was intoxicating, alarming. I need to go, she said, her voice firmer now, attempting to project an independence she didn't quite feel. She tried to step around him, but he simply extended a hand, not touching her, but effectively blocking her escape. His movements were fluid, effortless, like a predator toying with its prey. Not yet, he said, his eyes glinting in the low light. We have business to discuss. He gestured subtly to a sleek, black sedan that materialized from the shadows, its engine purring almost silently. The back door opened as if on cue. Alana's mind raced, a whirlwind of fear and defiance. She was trapped, undeniably so. The cold rain continued to fall, a silent witness to the unfolding drama. She still didn't know who he truly was, beyond the whispers and the imposing presence. But she knew, with a terrifying certainty, that her life as she knew it was over. Before you skip, just remember, channels like this only survive if you hit subscribe. Otherwise, stories like this one just disappear. The interior of the sleek sedan was a cocoon of luxury, a stark contrast to the damp, gritty alley they had just left. Plush leather seats cradled her as if she were a delicate artifact, and the faint scent of expensive wood and new car leather filled the air. Alana sat rigid, her hands clasped tightly in her lap, her gaze fixed on the rain-streaked window. The city lights, once a comforting blur, now seemed to mock her, a glittering cage of unknown dangers. He sat beside her, a silent, formidable presence. The light from passing street lamps occasionally illuminated his profile, the sharp angle of his jaw, the subtle curve of his lips, the intense focus in his dark eyes. He hadn't spoken since she reluctantly got into the car, a quiet command in his unyielding gaze that left no room for argument. The driver, a hulking man with a shaved head and an impassive face, navigated the winding streets with practiced ease, his movements smooth and precise. Alana felt a strange mix of terror and an unwelcome flicker of curiosity. Who was this man? What did he want with her? Her mind raced, sifting through every interaction, every glance, every overheard word from her shift at the Obsidian. She was just a waitress, an ordinary woman trying to make ends meet. She had no secrets, no connections to the shadowy world he clearly inhabited. Yet, here she was, in a car with a man who exuded danger and power, heading towards an unknown destination. The car pulled up to a discreet, imposing building in a part of the city she rarely ventured into, an area of towering glass and steel, where corporate power met old money. They ascended in a private elevator, its interior a minimalist dream of polished chrome and muted lighting. The silence was deafening, punctuated only by the soft hum of the machinery. Alana's heart hammered against her ribs, a frantic drumbeat against the stillness. When the doors finally opened, they revealed a penthouse apartment that defied description. It was vast, sprawling, with floor-to-ceiling windows offering a breathtaking panorama of the city below. The decor was modern, minimalist, yet undeniably luxurious, dark wood, muted tones, and strategic splashes of vibrant art. It was a space designed for power, for contemplation, for solitude. He led her into a spacious living area, gesturing to a low, leather sofa. Please, sit. His voice was calm, devoid of any discernible emotion, yet it held an undeniable authority. Alana hesitated for a moment, then slowly sank onto the plush cushions, her eyes darting around the room, taking in every detail. She felt like an intruder, a small, insignificant creature in a lion's den. He remained standing, his hands tucked into his pockets, his gaze fixed on her. My name is Nikolai Volkov, he stated, his voice a low rumble. And you, Alana Petrova, are in a predicament. The mention of her full name, a name she rarely used, sent another jolt through her. How do you know that? She demanded, a spark of defiance flashing in her eyes. Nikolai's lips curved into a faint, almost imperceptible smile. As I said, I make it my business to know things. Especially about those who witness certain events. He paused, letting his words hang in the air, thick with unspoken meaning. Alana's breath hitched. Witnessed what? She racked her brain, replaying the events of her shift. She had served drinks, cleared tables, moved through the room like a ghost. What could she possibly have seen? I don't understand, she whispered, her voice trembling slightly. I saw nothing. I heard nothing. Nikolai took a step closer, his eyes narrowing slightly. Perhaps not with your conscious mind, Alana. But sometimes, the subconscious retains what the conscious tries to ignore. And in my world, even an innocent glance can be problematic. He walked over to a large, mahogany desk, picking up a slim, leather-bound folder. He opened it, revealing a single photograph. It was a blurred image, taken from a distance, but Alana recognized herself instantly. She was standing near a service door, her back mostly to the camera, but her profile was unmistakable. In the background, two men were engaged in a heated discussion, their faces obscured by shadow. One of them, however, was clearly Nikolai. The other man, he seemed familiar, but she couldn't quite place him. This was taken tonight, Nikolai said, his voice softer now, almost conversational, yet infinitely more menacing. Just before you left. You were in the wrong place at the wrong time. Alana stared at the photograph, a cold dread seeping into her bones. She remembered that moment. She'd been waiting for a busboy to clear a tray, briefly distracted by a text message. She hadn't paid any attention to the men in the corner. What happened? She asked, her voice barely audible. Nikolai closed the folder with a soft click. That, Alana, is not for you to worry about. What matters is that you were there. You are now a loose end. He walked back towards her, his presence dominating the vast room. And in my line of work, loose ends are inconvenient. Alana felt a surge of adrenaline, a desperate need to escape. I swear, I won't say anything. I didn't see anything important, I promise. She pushed herself up from the sofa, her hands raised in a gesture of surrender. Nikolai stopped a few feet from her, his gaze intense, piercing. Your promises mean little in my world, Alana. Trust is a luxury I cannot afford. He paused, then continued, his voice dropping to a low, dangerous growl. However, I am not without compassion. I have another option for you. Alana's eyes widened, a flicker of hope amidst the despair. What option? What option? Alana repeated, her voice barely a whisper, a stark contrast to the thundering of her heart. She stood, a fragile figure. Against the backdrop of Nikolai's formidable presence, every nerve ending screaming for an escape that seemed utterly impossible. The city lights glittered through the immense windows, a mocking spectacle of freedom she no longer possessed. Nikolai's gaze was unreadable, a deep, dark pool that offered no reflection of his thoughts. He took a slow, deliberate step closer, and Alana instinctively flinched, a primal response to the proximity of such raw, untamed power. His scent, that sophisticated blend of expensive cologne and something uniquely masculine, was now overwhelming, intoxicating her senses even as her mind screamed for caution. You have a debt, Alana, he stated, his voice a low, resonant rumble that seemed to vibrate through the very air around them. A significant one. To me. Alana's brow furrowed in confusion. A debt? What are you talking about? I don't owe you anything. Her voice, though still laced with fear, held a rising note of indignation. She was a waitress, not a debtor. Her life was simple, her finances tight, but she had never been beholden to anyone. A faint, almost imperceptible smile played on Nikolai's lips, a subtle shift that sent a shiver down Alana's spine. You don't, directly. But your father, Alexei Petrova, did. The mention of her father's name hit Alana like a physical blow. Alexei. Her father had been gone for years, a shadow in her memory, a man who had vanished without a trace when she was just a child. He was a painful, unresolved chapter in her life, one she rarely spoke of. My father, she whispered, her voice barely audible. What does he have to do with you? Nikolai walked over to a sleek, minimalist bar, pouring himself a glass of amber liquid. He didn't offer her one. Alexei Petrova was a resourceful man. He dabbled in many things. Some legitimate, some less so. And he made certain arrangements. Arrangements that involved a substantial sum of money. My money. He took a slow sip, his eyes never leaving hers. He disappeared before he could fulfill his end of the bargain. A very large sum. Alana. One that has accumulated interest over the years. Alana stared at him, her mind reeling. Her father, a man she barely remembered, leaving her with a debt to a man like Nikolai Volkov? It was an absurd, terrifying nightmare. That's impossible, she breathed, shaking her head. My father, he was a good man. He wouldn't. Goodness is a subjective term, Alana, Nikolai interrupted, his voice devoid of sympathy. And irrelevant in this context. The debt exists. And now, it falls to you. But I can't pay that, she stammered, her gaze sweeping around the opulent penthouse. The sheer luxury of the place screamed of wealth beyond her wildest imagination. She made minimum wage, with tips. She lived paycheck to paycheck. This was a cruel joke. Nikolai placed his glass on the bar with a soft click, the sound echoing in the vast silence of the room. He walked back towards her, stopping inches away, his towering presence engulfing her. I know you can't. That's why I'm offering an alternative. His eyes, dark and intense, held hers captive. You will come work for me. Not as a waitress, Alana. But as a presence. Alana frowned, utterly bewildered. A presence? What does that even mean? It means you will be seen with me, he explained, his voice low and deliberate. You will accompany me to certain events, certain gatherings. You will be my companion. My confidant. My shadow, if you will. You will listen, you will observe, and you will learn. And in return, your father's debt will be managed. And your safety, guaranteed. The words hung in the air, heavy with unspoken implications. Companion. Confidant. Shadow. It sounded less like a job and more like a gilded cage. But the alternative was terrifying. She was a loose end, a witness to something she didn't understand, burdened by a debt she couldn't pay. Why me? She asked, her voice trembling. Why not someone else? Someone who actually knows your world? Nikolai's lips curved into that faint, unsettling smile again. Because you are different, Alana. You possess a quiet strength, an intelligence that is often underestimated. And you are untainted. In my world, that is a rare and valuable commodity. His gaze lingered on her, a possessive intensity that made her skin prickle. Besides, you speak Russian, do you not? Alana's breath caught in her throat. He knew that too. Her Russian heritage was something she kept private, a link to a past she rarely discussed. How did you know? She whispered. As I said, Nikolai replied, a hint of something that might have been amusement in his eyes. I make it my business to know things. Your father was a speaker of the old tongue. It stands to reason his daughter would be too. He paused, letting the weight of his words settle. It will be useful. Very useful. A cold knot of dread tightened in Alana's stomach. This was not a negotiation. This was an ultimatum. She was trapped, caught in a web spun by a man she barely knew, a man whose world was a dangerous labyrinth of power and secrets. She had a choice, but it was no choice at all. Either she accepted his terms, or she faced the unknown, the terrifying consequences of being a loose end in Nikolai Volkov's world. Her mind raced, desperately searching for an escape, a loophole, anything. But there was nothing. She was alone, in a stranger's penthouse, at the mercy of a man who held her past, her present, and her future in his formidable hands. The silence stretched between them, thick with unspoken tension, punctuated only by the distant hum of the city. What if I refuse? What if I refuse? Alana finally managed to ask, her voice barely a whisper, though a thread of steel ran through it, a testament to her stubborn spirit even in the face of overwhelming odds. She knew it was a foolish question, a desperate plea against the inevitable, but she had to ask. She had to voice the last remnants of her dwindling autonomy. Nikolai's expression remained unreadable, his dark eyes like obsidian, reflecting nothing but the cold, hard reality of her situation. He took another step closer, closing the distance between them until she could feel the subtle warmth radiating from his body, a dangerous proximity that both terrified and oddly captivated her. Refusal, Alana, is not an option for you, he stated, his voice a low, silken threat. Consider the alternatives. You are a witness to something you shouldn't have seen. My enemies would be interested in what you might know, even if you claim to know nothing. They are not as considerate as I am. He paused, letting his words sink in, each one a heavy stone dropping into the churning waters of her fear. And then there is the debt. A debt that, when unpaid, has severe repercussions. For you. For anyone you might care about. His gaze sharpened, a flicker of something possessive in its depths. I assure you, Alana, my way is the only way that ensures your continued well-being. The implication was clear. Her life, her very existence, was now intricately tied to his. There was no escape. No turning back. She was a pawn in a game she didn't understand, controlled by a player whose rules were absolute. A wave of despair washed over her, chilling her to the bone. Her independent life, her quiet aspirations, all of it seemed to crumble into dust around her. And what exactly would my duties entail, she asked, her voice flat, devoid of emotion. The fight had gone out of her, replaced by a grim resignation. She would survive. She always had. Nikolai's lips curved into a faint, almost triumphant smile, a subtle shift that made her stomach clench. Initially, you will simply be present. You will observe. You will learn. We will attend dinners, galas, meetings. You will be seen by my side, a silent testament to my preferences. He walked away from her, towards the panoramic windows, his silhouette framed against the glittering cityscape. You will reside here, in this penthouse. For your safety, and for my convenience. Reside here. With him. The words echoed in her mind, raising a fresh wave of panic. This wasn't just about a debt or a witness. This was about control. Absolute, undeniable control. I have my own apartment, she stammered. A desperate attempt to cling to some semblance of her old life. He turned, his eyes piercing through the twilight. That apartment, Alana, is no longer safe. Nor is it suitable. You are now under my protection. And my protection comes with certain requirements. His gaze swept over her, a slow, appraising look that made her feel utterly exposed. You will be provided for. Clothes, necessities, anything you require. Your old life, as you knew it, is over. Your new life begins now. Her new life. The phrase felt like a death sentence. She was being stripped of everything she knew, everything she held dear, and thrust into a world of shadows and secrets, a world she had no desire to be a part of. But what choice did she have? The unspoken threats, the chilling implications of Nikolai's words, left her with no room to maneuver. What about my job? She asked, a last, futile attempt to reclaim a piece of her identity. Nikolai scoffed softly. Your job is no longer relevant. You are now occupied elsewhere. Consider your employment with me, full-time. Alana felt a hot flush of anger rise within her. He was dismantling her life, piece by piece, with an arrogant ease that infuriated her. But beneath the anger, a cold fear still coiled in her gut. She knew, instinctively, that challenging him too much, too soon, would be a dangerous game. And what if I don't adapt, she ventured, her voice barely audible. His gaze softened imperceptibly, a fleeting moment that was gone as quickly as it appeared. You will adapt, Alana. You are stronger than you realize. And I am a patient man. But make no mistake, my patience has its limits. This arrangement is not a request. It is a necessity. He walked past her, towards a hidden door that seemed to blend seamlessly into the wall. I will have one of my people arrange for your belongings to be brought here tomorrow. For now, you will stay in the guest suite. He opened the door, revealing a dimly lit hallway. Follow me. Alana hesitated for a moment, her eyes darting around the vast living space, a silent farewell to the faint hope of escape. Then, with a heavy sigh, she followed him, her footsteps echoing softly on the polished marble floor. She was a bird caught in a gilded cage, and the bars were closing around her. The guest suite was as luxurious as the rest of the penthouse, a testament to Nikolai's immense wealth and impeccable taste. A king-sized bed, draped in silk, dominated the room. A private bathroom with a walk-in shower and a freestanding tub promised comfort she hadn't experienced in years. But none of it mattered. It was still a prison. You will have everything you need, Nikolai said, gesturing around the room. There is a direct line to the staff if you require anything. And a secured line, should you need to reach me. He paused at the door, his gaze lingering on her. Do not try to leave, Alana. This building is under constant surveillance. And my people are, everywhere. He closed the door softly, leaving her alone in the opulent silence. Before you skip, just remember, channels like this only survive if you hit subscribe. Otherwise, stories like this one just disappear. The click of the lock, though barely audible, resonated in Alana's ears like a final, definitive clang. She was truly alone now, yet paradoxically, more trapped than ever. The silence of the guest suite was heavy, a luxurious shroud that offered no comfort. She walked to the immense window, pressing her palm against the cool glass, looking out at the city lights that twinkled like distant, mocking stars. Freedom felt impossibly far away, a concept she could only gaze upon, never touch. Her reflection stared back at her, a stranger with wide, haunted eyes. This wasn't her life. This wasn't the future she had envisioned. She, Alana Petrova, a woman who prided herself on her independence, her ability to navigate the complexities of a tough city on her own terms, was now a prisoner of circumstance, an unwilling pawn in a game she barely understood. The thought of Nikolai, his intimidating presence, his cold, calculating eyes, sent a shiver down her spine. He was a force of nature, a man who bent the world to his will, and she was merely a leaf caught in his powerful current. The next morning, the reality of her new existence settled in with a chilling finality. A woman, impeccably dressed and with a severe bun, introduced herself as Anya, Nikolai's head of household staff. Anya was efficient, polite, and utterly devoid of warmth. She presented Alana with a selection of designer clothes, explaining that her old wardrobe was being disposed of and that she would be fitted for new garments later that day. Alana felt a fresh wave of humiliation. Her entire identity was being systematically erased, replaced by an image carefully curated by Nikolai. She was no longer Alana, the hard-working waitress, she was now Alana, Nikolai Volkov's companion. The thought was nauseating. Later that afternoon, Nikolai summoned her to his private study. The room was a monument to power and intellect, filled with towering bookshelves, rich leather, and a massive mahogany desk. He sat behind it, a formidable figure in a tailored suit, a stark contrast to her own simple dress. "Alana," he greeted, his voice as smooth and unyielding as polished stone. "We have much to discuss." He gestured to a chair opposite him. And she took a seat, her back ramrod straight, determined not to show any weakness. He laid out a series of rules, a rigid framework for her new life. She would not leave the penthouse without his explicit permission or without an escort. She would attend events with him, always at his side, always observing, never questioning in public. She would learn the names, the faces, the subtle nuances of his world. "You are to be my eyes and ears, Alana," he explained, his gaze piercing. "You will tell me what you see, what you hear. And you will understand that discretion is not merely a virtue in my world, it is a matter of survival." The weight of his words pressed down on her, a suffocating blanket of responsibility. She was not just a companion, she was an asset, a tool to be wielded. Their first public appearance was a gala at an exclusive downtown club, a place pulsating with understated power and opulence. Alana, dressed in a sleek black gown chosen by Anya, felt like an imposter. Every face she saw seemed to hold a secret, every smile a potential threat. Nikolai, by contrast, moved through the room with an almost regal ease, a king surveying his dominion. He introduced her simply as Alana, offering no further explanation, yet the way he held her arm, the subtle possessiveness in his gaze, spoke volumes. Men nodded respectfully, women eyed her with a mixture of curiosity and thinly veiled envy. She felt their stares, their whispers, their unspoken questions. She was a puzzle piece, unexpectedly dropped into a complex game. Nikolai, sensing her discomfort, leaned in, his voice a low rumble against her ear. "Observe, Alana. Learn. This is where the real business is done, beneath the veneer of champagne and polite conversation." His proximity was a strange blend of comfort and danger, a warmth that threatened to consume her. She found herself acutely aware of his scent, the subtle movements of his hand on her back, the way his eyes, so often cold, would occasionally flicker towards her with an intensity that made her breath catch. As the evening wore on, Alana began to notice the subtle currents of power flowing through the room. The way certain men deferred to Nikolai, the hushed tones when his name was mentioned, the almost reverent respect he commanded. She saw glimpses of the real business he spoke of, brief, intense conversations in hushed corners, knowing glances exchanged, deals sealed with a silent nod. It was a world of intricate alliances and unspoken threats, a delicate balance of power that could shift at any moment. She was a foreigner in this land, trying to decipher its cryptic language. A tall, impeccably dressed man with sharp eyes approached them. "Nikolai, my friend," he said, a forced smile on his lips. "And who is this lovely creature you brought with you?" His gaze lingered on Alana, a predatory glint in his eyes. Nikolai's grip on Alana's arm tightened almost imperceptibly. "This is Alana," he stated, his voice calm, but with an underlying steel that brooked no argument. "She is with me." The man's smile faltered slightly, a flicker of understanding passing through his eyes. He nodded, a grudging acceptance of Nikolai's unspoken claim. "Of course. A pleasure, Alana." He moved on, but Alana could feel his eyes on her back. The interaction left her unsettled. She was not merely a companion, she was a symbol, a declaration of ownership. Days turned into weeks, a blur of luxurious confinement and forced proximity. Days turned into weeks, a blur of luxurious confinement and forced proximity. Alana's initial fear slowly began to morph into a strange, unsettling familiarity. She learned Nikolai's routines, the subtle shifts in his mood, the way his dark eyes could convey a multitude of unspoken commands. She observed him in meetings, witnessing the ruthless efficiency with which he conducted his affairs, the unwavering authority he wielded. He was a man of immense power, and she was inextricably caught in his orbit. Yet, there were moments, fleeting and unexpected, when she saw glimpses of another Nikolai. Late one evening, she found him in the penthouse library, staring out at the city lights, a glass of amber liquid in his hand. His guard was down, his usual impenetrable facade softened by a profound melancholy. "You cannot sleep?" she asked, her voice softer than she intended. He turned, his eyes briefly meeting hers, and for a split second, she saw a raw vulnerability there, a deep-seated sadness that tugged at something within her. "Some nights, the past is a relentless ghost," he admitted, his voice a low rasp. He didn't elaborate, but the words hung in the air, heavy with unspoken trauma. It was a rare crack in his armor, a moment that chipped away at her perception of him as a purely cold, calculating figure. Before you skip, just remember, channels like this only survive if you hit subscribe. Otherwise, stories like this one just disappear. Their forced proximity also began to ignite a different kind of tension. In the confined space of his luxurious car, during endless dinners, or even just in the shared silence of the penthouse, Alana found herself increasingly aware of him. His scent, a subtle blend of expensive cologne and something uniquely his, would often linger in her senses. His accidental touches, a brush of his hand against hers, a fleeting touch of his arm, would send a jolt through her. She fought against it, against the undeniable pull she felt, a dangerous attraction to a man who represented everything she should fear. He, too, seemed to be affected. His gaze would often linger on her, a silent intensity that spoke volumes. He would sometimes catch her eye across a crowded room, a shared glance that felt like a secret whispered only between them. The resistance she had initially felt, the fierce independence she clung to, was slowly, insidiously, eroding. One afternoon, a package arrived for Alana, a collection of art books, rare editions she had once admired in a small gallery. It was an unexpected gesture, a silent acknowledgement of her interests, a stark contrast to the ruthless man she knew. She looked at the books, then at the closed door of Nikolai's study, a knot of confusion and a strange warmth forming in her chest. He saw her, truly saw her, in ways no one else ever had. This was the discovery phase, the realization that he was not just a captor, but a complex, multifaceted man capable of unexpected kindness. The turning point came during a tense meeting at an isolated warehouse by the docks. Nikolai had taken her along, as he often did, instructing her to observe. The air was thick with unspoken threats, the men around them radiating an almost palpable menace. Suddenly, an argument erupted, voices rising, and a gun was drawn. Alana froze, her heart hammering against her ribs. Before she could even react, Nikolai moved, a blur of speed and controlled power. He shielded her instantly, his body a solid wall between her and the danger, his hand pressing firmly against her back, guiding her behind a stack of crates. He dealt with the situation with brutal efficiency, his voice a low, dangerous growl that commanded immediate obedience. The conflict was resolved, the threat neutralized, but the image of him protecting her, the sheer force of his possessive concern, burned itself into her mind. Later, back in the relative safety of the penthouse, Alana confronted him. "Why did you do that?" she asked, her voice trembling slightly. "You didn't have to protect me like that." He turned from the window, his eyes dark and intense. "You are with me, Alana," he stated, his voice firm. "And when you are with me, you are under my protection. Always." He paused, then took a step closer, his gaze softening almost imperceptibly. "I will not allow harm to come to you." It was more than just a declaration of ownership, it was a promise, a raw, unfiltered display of his protective instincts. In that moment, the last vestiges of her resistance crumbled. She saw not just the boss, but the man, the one who carried a past he wouldn't speak of, the one whose cold exterior hid a fierce, almost desperate need to protect what was his. The next few weeks were a delicate dance of unspoken emotions. The chemistry between them became undeniable, a silent current that crackled in the air whenever they were close. His touches lingered longer, his gaze held hers with an intensity that made her blush. She found herself seeking out his presence, drawn to the dangerous warmth he offered. Then came the betrayal. A trusted lieutenant, a man named Valerie, whom Nikolai had considered a brother, orchestrated a move against him, attempting to seize control of a vital territory. The news hit Nikolai hard. Alana saw the raw pain in his eyes, the flicker of disillusionment that briefly shattered his composure. She watched him, heartbroken, as he dealt with the fallout, his usual composure replaced by a simmering rage. One evening, after a particularly brutal day of damage control, Alana found him in his study, staring at a framed photograph on his desk, a younger Nikolai with a woman whose eyes held the same haunted sadness as his own. "My mother," he said, his voice barely a whisper, as if reading her thoughts. "She was caught in the crossfire.